Hey YouTube, it's the Cousin Dan again. Today I'm going to install something that I just got from Amazon. It is a CompuStar 4900S remote starter. It is a gift for my wife, and I have about 3.5 to 4 hours to install it without her knowing because she's at a birthday party, so we'll see if this can happen. I also have a little made in China Banvi universal immobilizer bypass something or other. Basically all it does is has a little box that has the guts in it, and you put a key in it. You have to give up a key. So I actually had 2 keys, and I cloned to a 3rd key so I could donate it to this. It has a copper cable that goes around the ignition port and some wire. That's it. So what this does is it bypasses the immobilizer security system on your car, so your car thinks that there is a key in the ignition when you hit the button on the remote starter, because the key is actually inside of the dashboard, but its chip is actually projected around the port. Then it should actually work. So it has some good reviews. It's $10. I think it was $11 for this thing, and this 4900S system was $129, I think. So overall, not crazy expensive. It costs you probably 2 to 3 times that to have it installed somewhere. I have an instruction booklet. This is, like I said, this is the first time I've ever done this, so I'm going to test to see how difficult this is to actually install. Some people said that you really need to be a professional to install it. The book says you have to be a professional to install it. The book does not have a wiring diagram. The book has very minimal instructions on what each wire is. For example, this one says green and white. This is the positive parking light that triggers when you lock and unlock the doors to remote start the vehicle. The positive parking light wire. Does that mean that this is the positive parking light wire, like it's taking a signal from the parking lights, or am I actually putting power out from the module to illuminate the parking lights? It doesn't really say. So my first finding is scrap this book partially. You want to know what the pins all do. But look up the one for a Bulldog security system, because that's designed for you to install. And it's actually a really handy instruction, and it's very much the same. So nothing against CompuStar, except you have a instruction booklet that's not meant for the average person. Look up the Bulldog system manual and use them together. This is the CM900 brain module that comes with this kit. So if you're looking at that, that's what that is. And so here we go. We're going to see how difficult this is to actually install. Now every car is going to be a little different, but I think I need to start by removing the kick panel down here, and here I have a brake controller for towing trailers, but that's going to come off, and that's kind of independent. And then you need to take off the covering around the steering column as well. Now I have the kick panel and the steering column cover taken off. Here I just had 3 screws across the bottom, and I had 3 screws on the bottom of the steering column here, and then I kind of snapped everything apart. So here you have your immobilizer sensor. You can see that it goes around the ignition. These wires go in here, and this detects the presence of the chip in the key. I'm actually going to add to this. I'm going to put another one right around this, that copper wire, that will tell this thing that there's a key there, even though the key is going to be way up under the dash on top of the radio, or somewhere where I can hide it in the box. And then this is the wire that goes to the surrounder for the steering wheel, so that means that all the switches on the steering wheel work. So we're going to leave that alone. And then this big cable in the back here, this one right here, is the one that plugs into the back of the whole ignition module. So that's one that we're probably going to be dealing with. But the first thing I want to look at is exposing the back of this, because we need the parking light switch. So I wanted to show you a lot of these things in these sorts of compartments just pop off. They just have these clips here that slide right into the little slots. So if you don't find a screw, sometimes it means that there's not a screw. So you pull that off, and I don't want that. What I want is that. That's the back of this guy. So we're going to move forward here. One of the first things I want to do is locate where I'm going to pull my main 12 volt power from for these two. So both of these have to be hooked up to constant 12 volt power. They are both broken at 30 amps. And then I have this one, which will be something else later on. So I don't really want to pull a lot of power from anything in here. I certainly don't want to do it from the ignition module. I'm just a little hesitant about doing that because those are all fused as well, and I might blow their fuse and it would just lead to an electrical nightmare. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 3 of these guys and I'm going to come out here and pull it directly off of positive, run it under here, this blue wire, run this blue wire all the way down behind all these panels so you don't see it, and then go right through that into the cabin, which will pop out way back in there in that circle. And then I'm going to have all these 3 together. So the main one's going to be one of these, and then each of these 2 is going to be another one of these, and I'm going to put a bolt and a nut through the middle of it, and that's how I'm going to get my 12-volt power. So here's my setup. The blue is the power from the battery, and it gets double nutted right here. And then what I'm going to do is just press this over. So I get these lined up. They're all kind of crimped in place. I certainly don't want to have any shorts down there. So then I take my heat gun. Right, just that simple. We have a nice connection. I'm going to wrap this with electrical tape as well so we don't just bridge out on anything under there. I have also, because I really don't want this to give me any problems, put some dielectric grease on there, just a little bit of it in between. Hopefully that'll help out over time. Now, something it seems like I should do before I start running wires is to actually mount the brain where it's going to live so that I don't accidentally make a permanent connection on a wire and have it wrapped around something and I really wanted it to go the other way, that kind of thing. So I have some cable ties here, and I have a piece of foam, and I'm going to cable tie it to a piece of frame down there that I found that is kind of out of the way, and this foam will allow it to not see a lot of vibration while it's on that piece of frame. So now I have these 2 red wires going to fuses, connecting to the blue wire, coming up through this waterproof junction. By the way, I used an awl and I spiked it, and then I pushed the wire through so it sealed itself around the wire. The wire goes under the frame and you don't see it anywhere until it pops out right here by the battery. So try to hide it. Every vehicle is going to be a little different, but the better you hide it, the better it'll look, and then it's also protected. Just make sure wherever you run the wire, it's not going to be against anything hot, and it's not going to be vibrating and abrading the protective sheathing on the wire so that it grounds out at some point after you drive a while. So you don't want to do that. The next wire I want to hook up is the one for the parking lights, and what I've done is I have my voltmeter, and the negative side is just hooked to the frame, and then I'm just using this one to probe the back of the pin connector for this switch. And all you do, and this is going to be a similar frequent concept in installation of something like this, you turn on your parking lights, not your headlights, just your parking lights, and you want 12 volts. So I turn on the parking lights, and I get 12 volts, turn it off, I get 0. That's how you find that that's the one that you want, that one pin that I have. So now I'm going to tie the green and white wire per the instructions into the blue wire on the back of there, and we're going to do that for every one of the wires that we're going to try to find. So for some reason, when I unplugged this connector from the back of the switch, it started beeping at me like the parking lights are on, so I don't know what that's about. Sorry about that. But what I've done is I've stripped the wire and then kind of parted some of the strands. This is a good way to tie a wire into an existing run without cutting it. You can then just feed your wire into the middle of that part and then kind of close the part, and then separate the strands of your wire into 2 kind of separate bundles, and then wrap one of those bundles around the wire in one direction, and then you can wrap the other bundle around the wire in the other direction. You could go in the same direction too, it shouldn't be a big deal. But ultimately what you end up with is kind of something like that, and then you can solder that and then wrap it. There's your soldered connection. So so now I have that plugged back in. It's all taped up and soldered. And a good thing to do would be to cross-check it. So I'm going to put my connector right there and just make sure that on the CompuStar side I get 12 volts. And I do. Turn off my lights and I go to 0. Great. Cross-check. Now I'm looking for a wire that is at 12 volts, 0 volts when in the off position, 12 volts in the on position, 0 volts during cranking, and then 12 volts again after cranking in the on position. So I've got it on a pin here on the back, and I can show you. I go to the on position, I get 12 volts, I go to crank, 0 volts, back to the on position, immediately back to 12, 13 volts, 14 volts. So this is the one. So that's how I found that one. So I have the one that's on in the on position, off during crank, on again, and then this is the one that's off in the off position, off in the on position, only on during crank, and off after crank. Okay, so I've added another one here for, I think that was when the power was on during crank or off during crank. It's all in here. And then I've added the ground. Make sure that you make that nice and tight, and that you scrape off any rust in the area where it's going to contact. If you have any rust, I put some dielectric grease on there as well. And now I have installed the hood pin that comes with. When the hood closes, it pushes the button down, and it just basically disconnects a blade connector so that when the hood is down, you have nothing, and when the hood is up, it grounds out. So that is this. I've put it through the same port in the firewall, and I'm just going to pin that on there. And that is for the purpose of if you're working under the hood and you have the serpentine belt maybe in your way, or you're near a starter or something that's going to move, you don't want this automated system to start the engine while your hands are in there. That could be really dangerous. So when the hood is up, the remote start will not work because of this. So with that hooked up, I have one pin on power and one in the wire that goes to the hood pin. So if I pop the hood, I should see 12 volts. And there it is. So the hood pin works. Okay, so I've hooked up the wire to the brake light so that when you hit the brake pedal, the light comes on. That tells you that tells the computer you've hit the brake pedal, and I think that will shut the engine off when it's been remote started. I think that's the function of that. It was easier for me to find because I have my brake controller here, and the light turns on the brake controller, or you just hit the brake pedal and see if your 12 volts shows up in the coupler. Next, I put the this is the antenna. So let me put the key in here. So the key is in the ignition, and I have the remote control here. So let's give it a shot. I think everything's hooked up. The key being in the ignition is just so that it knows that the proximity is there, because I haven't set up the proximity sensor thing. So here we go. I guess I hold this. I heard it click. There it goes, and it's running. That is positive. I think I can shut it off with the same thing. Hold it. There it goes. It works. Okay, now to set this thing up so it's actually standalone. Okay, this thing's pretty simple. It says that you take the little square chip out, or you can put the whole key in. If you put the whole key in, you're supposed to slide it into the box like this, then you put the cover back on, and then you run the wires up, and you put this around the ignition switch like that, and underneath the plastic, and then you just put 12 volts to it and put the other side to ground. So let's give it a shot. Okay, so now I have that thing hidden somewhere deep in my vehicle, and I have this just kind of resting here around the start, and I'm going to push the button here, hold it, I hear it trying, there we go. And it works. The car started with no key in the ignition. I'm going to tape that in that location and then put everything back together. Well, it really wasn't too bad. It's all back together. No key in the ignition. Hold the button. This one makes a sound effect. There we go. Well, YouTube, thanks for watching. It really wasn't that bad. You definitely need to know how to use a voltage meter. I would highly recommend soldering things in place and shrink wrapping things, just because it's in a vehicle and you really don't want this aspect of a vehicle's electronics to fail on you ever. So I would definitely do that. But overall, I would recommend it. It's really not that bad if you're a car person or an electronics person in any way, shape, or form. And I will take back a little of what I said about the instructions. They were a little more helpful as I went through, because they describe what the wires are supposed to do, which allows you to kind of find them a little bit better. But the one for the Bulldog was actually a lot more user-friendly. If you do get stuck on the others, that's a good resource. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to the Cousin Dan.